What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan, and today we are here, or tonight really, we are here to break down the 2025 Washington Commanders schedule for this upcoming season. There's a lot to talk about, as many of you have probably seen the schedule by now by the time this podcast is coming out, but I really wanted to break down kind of the statistics behind it and basically some common trends that I've noticed within this schedule and where can Washington, look to take advantage versus when, maybe a tougher stretch, things like that. I'm also going to give at the end of the episode my initial reaction, wins, loss wise, to this Washington Commanders 2025 NFL schedule. So let's just dive right into it. We've got the schedule for Washington. This was their official, graphic that they made for this event. It was released last Wednesday. We'll start with the preseason. Washington is going to New England and Cincinnati, and then they are playing. They're going to New England, and then they're playing the Bengals and the Ravens, both at home. So that is what the preseason schedule will look like. The Patriots are the first one. It sounds like there's going to be a joint practice with the Patriots as well. So that is something to note. I know Washington is also in the works of maybe trying to get a joint practice with either the Bengals or the Ravens as well. So that is something to keep an eye on. But the preseason for Washington, Patriots, Bengals, and Ravens. The Bengals game, I believe, is a Monday night as well. So also keep note of that as well. So let's jump, though, right into the regular season because this is what, people actually care about. We've got the season opener against the New York Giants at home. It's a 1:00 game. I love this for Washington. You go up against a team where you're going to be favored. We can set the tone early against definitely a weaker team, but as well, you cannot take this game for granted. You can't take any game for granted in the NFL, and this is going to be a tough game out of the gate. If you come out sloppy, it gives the Giants a good opportunity. I know there's kind of a mystery right now. Who is going to be that starting quarterback for the New York Giants week one? That'll be fun to keep an eye on that training camp battle because it's going to really matter for Washington right out of the gate for them. So the Giants, week number one on a Sunday at 1:00 in Landover, Maryland. That's going to be a fun game. It's going to be a classic wake up NFL Sunday, first NFL Sunday of the year. I love having that 1:00 game because you get right into it if you're a Washington fan, and it feels right. It feels right. I know we love these prime time games for the Commanders and not having a lot of these 1:00 games, but the 1:00 games are every once in a while it's still great, and especially to kick off the season, that early slate of games on a Sunday. You put your jersey on, you put your Commanders gear on, you're ready to go. It's gonna be awesome. So I love this for Washington, just kicking things off pretty normal, nothing special here. 1:00 at home against the Giants, but immediately going into week number two, things get crazy for the Washington Commanders. There are a total of 6 primetime games, 8 standalone games, 6 officially listed as primetime, but basically 8 standalone games on national TV for the Washington Commanders. And it starts in week 2. It starts early. The Commanders are traveling to Green Bay, Lambeau Field, and playing the Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football. It'll be a short week immediately for Washington. You've got the Giants at home on Sunday. You've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, playing another game on Thursday against the Packers. Packers, a very good team, a team that made the playoffs last year. They're going to be a team. It's going to be something to watch. It's going to be a very competitive game, in my opinion. Again, you cannot rule out or say, hey, right out of the gates, this is going to be an easy win for Washington. Now, it will definitely be a harder opponent, in my opinion, than a team like the Giants in week number 2. But again, it's going to be a game Washington is going to have some advantages in. And, it's hard to call a game super early, like in May, like we're doing now. But this is really going to be a good, fun game, kind of a toss-up almost between the Packers and the Commanders, two young franchise quarterbacks going at it. It's going to be a very fun one to watch on a Thursday night. I do like how, and I know some people have already pointed this out, but I do like how this game in Lambeau is in September. All right. That's something to take into account, the weather for these games, because as many of you know, Washington has 8 standalone games, which is tied for the most in the NFL among any teams, I believe, with the Chiefs and the Cowboys. But 8 standalone games this year, and or Chiefs and some other team. I can't remember exactly, but 8 standalone games. And so the weather's actually going to be playing a factor in some of these, just how the schedule kind of works out, especially when you're playing in an outdoor stadium like what the Green Bay Packers have at Lambeau Field. And playing that in September, even though it's a night game, I mean, imagine that night game happening in the middle of December. That would be rough. You could get a snow game, which is fun to watch as fans, but also kind of, levels the playing field, and you got more prone to injuries in a snow game. So even though it's fun for fans, it's not really fun for players. So I really like how this game has kind of worked out for Washington, playing the Packers pretty early on in week number 2 in September on Thursday night. Now we go to week number 3. We've got the Las Vegas Raiders, week 3, Sunday, 1 o'clock on September 21st. This one is going to be a pretty fun one as well. I think Washington is definitely going to be favored going into this game against Las Vegas. But, Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, that era in Las Vegas, how is that going to, translate in the first few weeks of the season? I'm excited to go up against this team. It's going to be in Landover, Maryland. Washington has 8 home games this year in Landover, so this is the second of those 8. But against the Raiders on the 21st of September, just a 1 o'clock game. Once more, I am a-okay with some of these earlier games, being these 1 o'clock games, as long as Washington doesn't have 12 or 13 1 o'clock Sunday games like they had a few years ago. I'm a-okay with having some of these 1 o'clock games, because look, even though some fans might not like it, I think it's great waking up on Sunday morning knowing this team plays at 1. You watch that game, then you've got some pretty good matchups the rest of the day. I like it a lot. So we've got the Raiders 1 o'clock. That'll be a fun one against Geno Smith and the Raiders. Week number 4, we've got the Atlanta Falcons, a rematch against Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons. Penix, Daniels, that Sunday night game where Washington had a chance to clinch a playoff spot for the first time since 2020, and that is exactly what they did in overtime. It was a very close one for Washington back in, late December. It was definitely a one of those games, especially in that second half of the year, that came down to the final play. But Washington was able to beat Atlanta, and we saw that duel between Penix and Daniels. Especially, Penix, I got to give him his props. He led that game-tying drive down the stretch in those final few minutes. So it was definitely a fun matchup. And now, again, Washington is going to play a lot of second-year quarterbacks this year, Michael Penix being the first one of those second years on the schedule. This is happening September 28th, week number 4, 1 o'clock on Sunday. Week number 5, we've got the Los Angeles Chargers playing at 4:25 in LA, SoFi Stadium. So 2 back-to-back away games. We're going from Landover to Atlanta to Los Angeles. That is all in one. That is all, just casual Sunday games, no short weeks there. You've got 3 games, traveling from Atlanta, probably back up to DC, and then going over to LA. So it's a West Coast game against the Chargers. But once more, it's going to be a fun one. These first 5 games, Washington has the ability to get off to a hot start and beat some pretty good teams. Some teams that are kind of maybe sitting middle of the pack right now. Like, we don't know exactly how the Falcons are going to do or the Chargers are going to do. They're probably right now sitting middle of the pack. You could get some pretty impressive wins early on for this Washington team within the first 5 weeks. So the first 5 weeks, the Giants at home, Packers on the road, Raiders home, Falcons on the road, Chargers on the road. Leads us to week number 6. And week number 6 is really where Washington's schedule gets kind of crazy, because you've got, those first 5 games, but then, and all of those are kind of on Sunday, except that one Thursday night football game against the Packers. But after that, it gets pretty crazy. We're going home against the Bears, Caleb Williams versus Jane Daniels, the rematch, Hail Mary, all of that. rematch Sunday Night Football, I believe, or maybe it's Monday night. I will have to double check that, but I believe that is Monday night. Now I'm looking at it. Monday Night Football against the Bears. Caleb Williams and Jane Daniels. That will be a fun one to watch. I believe there's another game going on at that time as well. But the first overall pick versus the second overall pick, we saw what happened last year in that game. And even though the majority of the game actually was not, that entertaining, the offenses never really got going in that game for either side. It was just at the end, the Hail Mary and everything that ensued for both of those franchises down the rest of the season. But this is still going to be a very good game. You've got the Bears who added Colson Loveland in the draft. They kind of rebuilt their offensive line for Caleb Williams to kind of play behind. And, Washington made their own additions with adding Laramie Tunsil, Josh Connolly, Deebo Samuel. That's going to be a very fun matchup on a Monday night, which also you get a little bit of a break coming back from the West Coast. You get an extra day of rest after playing in LA. So I like that a lot. After that Monday night game, so one less day of rest, they go on to play the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry's World. So the Cowboys in Dallas, a 4:25 game, America's game of the week, yada, yada. Cowboys, Commanders, rivalry old as time. Not really much to say, but it's just the stretch of some very good teams for Washington. Because after the Cowboys game in Jerry's World, you go on to play the Chiefs on a Monday night. Again, so 2 Monday night games within a span of 3 weeks. The Chiefs on a Monday night again. You've got on that is now October 27th, week number 8, I believe, is a Monday night game against the Chiefs. Jane Daniels versus Patrick Mahomes. That's the first matchup between those two. It's going to be a very fun quarterback duel on that day. So, Monday night game for the Chiefs going into Arrowhead for Jaden's first time going into Arrowhead, which I got to say, Arrowhead Stadium is definitely one of the kind of more crazier environments in the National Football League right now, especially with, some of those playoff games running through Arrowhead and all of that. But going to Arrowhead, it'll be Jane Daniels' first time. I mentioned it last season. I don't think that's going to phase Jane Daniels at all. We saw him at LSU playing the biggest SEC football stadiums in the country. So I don't think it'll phase him at all, but it'll be just a pretty fun environment with Commanders going into Arrowhead Stadium to play the Chiefs on Monday Night Football. Following the Monday Night Football game in Kansas City, they're going back home, Landover, Maryland, not FedEx Field, now Northwest Stadium, week number 9 against the Seattle Seahawks. That is now November 2nd. It is a Sunday Night Football matchup against Sam Darnold, Jalen Milroe, whoever that may be, at quarterback for the Seattle Seahawks. Mike McDonald leading the charge as the head coach there in Seattle. Another very fun game for Washington. This stretch of games heading into the bye week is pretty crazy for Washington, but also, it's going to be a lot of fun football. And you look at that stretch, week number 6 to week number 9, 3 out of 4 of those games are going to be either Monday or Sunday night. That just shows, America wants to see Jane Daniels in this team play. And you've probably heard that already on other podcasts, but it is true. It is true. And that's why Washington got 8 standalone games this year. So Sunday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks, week number 9, leads us to week number 10. And I think this will also be a pretty tough matchup. A rematch, a divisional round rematch against the Detroit Lions. I believe this is also one of those Fox's America's Game of the Week against the Lions here. Back-to-back games in Landover. And you look at some of these opponents, right? And who Washington is playing on the road versus who Washington is playing at home. Seattle, Sunday Night Football at home. The Bears on a Monday Night Football game will be at home. The Lions will be at home. A lot of these big games, beyond the Chiefs one, you could say, and maybe the Packers on a Thursday night, but really beyond the Chiefs, a lot of these big games for Washington are going to be at home in Northwest Stadium, which you love to see. So the Detroit Lions on America's Game of the Week, week number 10 at 4:25 p.m. That leads us to week number 11. And I know this was rumored last week before it actually was made public, but the Commanders are traveling to Spain and they are playing the Miami Dolphins in Madrid, Spain, week number 11. It will be a 9:30 a.m. kickoff, which I mean, it's fine with me on the East Coast, but I feel for those West Coast Commanders fans waking up at 6:30 a.m. to watch their team, which that's got to be a little rough. But I was wondering how with these other European international games, what are they going to do? Is it always going to be at 9:30 a.m.? And it sounds like it is. So Washington against Miami in Spain, 9:30 a.m. Jane Daniels against Tua Tagovailoa. That'll be a fun one in week number 11. So then we get to week number 12, and Washington has the bye. So, like I mentioned, that is a pretty crazy stretch of games right before you bye. Week 6, Monday Night Football. Week 7, divisional round game of divisional rivalry against the Cowboys. Week 8 at Arrowhead. Week 9, Sunday Night Football. Week 8 at Arrowhead, Monday Night Football. Week 9, Sunday Night Football. Week 10, the Lions. Week 11, Spain. So that is a pretty crazy stretch of games in October and in November before you head into that week 12 bye for Washington. And it kind of gets, it kind of stays at that amount of craziness right when you get out of that week 12 bye, because you've got the Broncos, who are also coming off of a bye, I believe, playing the Broncos week 13 on Sunday Night Football. So that is, a lot of primetime games and a lot of games against some playoff caliber teams between October and November. I know JP Finley mentioned it and some other, beat reporters already mentioned it, but Washington does not play a single 1:00 Sunday game in October or in November. That just shows how much, these fans want to see Washington play, and these viewers want to see Washington play in primetime games. And a lot of these big time matchups for Washington are now primetime. You look at not only just games against Patrick Mahomes or Caleb Williams, both of those games being primetime. You adding on the Seahawks as well, the Broncos, those games, two teams that may not be at the top of the league, but are still competitive teams that may or may not be competitive at that time. I expect the Broncos to have one of the best defenses in the NFL. I would expect them to be very competitive, but we don't know if the Seahawks are going to be good in November. We don't know. I mean, I guess you could say we don't know if Washington's going to be good in November, but we've got a pretty good feeling. We don't know if Miami's going to be good, but we've got primetime games against both of those teams, which just shows how much fans are valuing the Washington Commanders right now, which is just awesome to see. So week 12 bye, week 13 Sunday Night Football against the Broncos, then things start to chill out a little bit because we've got the Vikings week 14 on the road, back-to-back road games. So week 14 Vikings, that is a 1:00 game on a Sunday. You've got J.J. McCarthy most likely matching up against Jane Daniels, and this is just another one of those second-year quarterbacks Jane Daniels is playing. The Jane Daniels is going to be going up against every single quarterback that got drafted in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft except Drake May. He's going up against Michael Penix in week 4, Caleb Williams in week 6. All right, you've got Bo Nix in week 13, and now J.J. McCarthy in week 14. That is 4 quarterbacks. Yeah, if I count right. Yep, that's 4 of those rookie quarterbacks of those 5 that he could play. Again, 6 quarterbacks went in the first round, an astronomical number. 6 quarterbacks went in the first round of the 2024 NFL Draft, and now Washington is going to be playing 4 of those this season. So that will be fun to kind of keep an eye on, see how Jane Daniels does in those matchups. I know, again, it's not quarterback versus quarterback, right? It's quarterback versus defense, but still seeing, Daniels versus Penix, Daniels versus Williams, who kind of comes out on top with the better quarterback performance. Daniels versus Nix, I think, will be fun. Daniels versus McCarthy. McCarthy is probably the biggest mystery of those 4 on how he will play next year. So that is going to be a very fun one against the Vikings. And also, I want to thank the Vikings for having a dome stadium, because playing in Minnesota in December would not be fun if it was an outdoor stadium. But since they are in US Bank Stadium, which is a dome, they are playing inside. So that is also huge for Washington in terms of just the weather and everything happening there. But after that game against Minnesota, Washington's got a Week 15 matchup against the New York Giants. This one is on the road. So again, they open up the season against them at home, but then they play them again in Week 15 on the road. This Giants game will be a start of a pretty crucial stretch for Washington. It seems like this entire, there's always something going on with the schedule in terms of these games being crucial. But you look at this Giants game, a game that is probably going to be a game you should win in December. But this is the start of a 4-game divisional stretch to wrap up the season for the Washington Commanders. You've got on the road Week 15 against the Giants. Week 16 against the Philadelphia Eagles is a game on a Saturday, and that is because Christmas Day, Cowboys versus Commanders in Northwest Stadium before wrapping things up at Philadelphia at the Link in Week 18. So that is a pretty crazy final 4 games, 4 straight divisional games after only playing 2 in the first 14 weeks. Again, you play 6 total divisional games, 2 against each of your 3 opponents. You only play 2 divisional games, 1 in Week 1 and 1 in Week 7, and then you finish off with 4 straight. The division will be decided in those final 4 weeks, and more crucially, in those final 3 weeks, I would think. But the division is going to be decided Week 16 through Week 18. And I'll get to it in a second, but I think this final stretch for Washington could mean something pretty fun for Washington Commanders fans coming up. But before I get to that and my theories about why Washington has 4 divisional games to wrap up the season, just wrapping things up, again, you've got the Saturday game against the Eagles, Week 16, Christmas Day. So it's only a 5-day, really only a 4-day stretch for Washington. You play Saturday, and then you play Thursday against the Cowboys before you get a mini bye before playing the Eagles in Week 18. I do think that mini bye is going to be pretty crucial for this Washington team. If they do go ahead and they drop the game against Philadelphia in Week 16, having that mini bye before playing them again in Week 18 is huge. So again, I think this schedule overall, in terms of the logistics of it, went out pretty good. Washington has a really tough schedule this year, and I believe it's in the top 15, top half of the league in terms of strength of schedule. But the way that they went about scheduling it is pretty much as the best they could do. If you're going to give Washington 8 primetime or standalone games this year, putting it in the way that, the schedule makers did is probably the best, best possible. It is probably the best possible. It's not perfect because no schedule, really is perfect. But for the first time in, 3 years, Washington doesn't have a Week 14 bye. So that is always, a plus. I think week 12 is probably a good position for it. Maybe, middle of the season is a couple weeks earlier. But after having a game in Spain, having a bye week right after that, that is perfect. That is perfect. So the way the schedule makers went about creating Washington's schedule, I really liked how they did it. I think the final 4, my theory about this, the final 4 games, the divisional games, Week 15 through 18, the reason why I think, the schedule makers made Washington play a lot of divisional games down the stretch, especially the 2 matchups against the Philadelphia Eagles, is because I really think we are going to be getting an in-season Hard Knocks NFC East edition. It has kind of been known, at least to me, that the Hard Knocks wants to do a divisional in-season series. So they did the AFC North last year. The goal now is to do, one division each season. So next season, let's say it's the NFC East, and the season after that is a different division. That's what they want to do for the next 7 years. So that's what they're going to try to do. So having this stretch of games for Washington, 4 divisional games at the back end of the season, keeps the division competitive for Hard Knocks down the year. And Hard Knocks doesn't start until, week, what is it, 12 or 13 usually, not till November or maybe even early December, probably like mid-November, right? So you got the Week 12 bye, and then maybe Hard Knocks starts up Week 13. I don't know when it started up for the other divisions, but or for the other, in-season Hard Knocks. But I really think, NFL Films and Hard Knocks, they really wanted the Washington Commanders to be the training camp Hard Knocks. And maybe they still end up being the training camp Hard Knocks. But I think there is a very, 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 very likely chance we're going to get an NFC East Hard Knocks in season, because the NFC East right now is at the top. It is at the top. It is the division most people are talking about. Pretty much everyone is talking about the NFC East. The Eagles coming off of a Super Bowl victory, unfortunately, but they are. Washington, you've got, one of the youngest, you got a young star at quarterback for Washington. Dallas, well, they're Dallas. And then the Giants, I don't know, you can kind of put in, Dable is on the hot seat. How will he do? Joe Shane on the hot seat. They got Jackson Dart in there. I really think we will be getting a in-season Hard Knocks this year, and it will be the NFC East. I am like 80% sure. I would be pretty shocked if it's not an in-season Hard Knocks, because I know Washington is actually eligible for training camp Hard Knocks this year because they got rid of the requirement that you need to not make the playoffs the year before. And since Washington made the playoffs the year before, usually they wouldn't be eligible unless they volunteered to do Hard Knocks this offseason or this training camp. But since they just got rid of that requirement this offseason, Washington is eligible. And I know NFL Films definitely wanted Washington to be on training camp Hard Knocks. Now, I don't know if Dan Quinn would have allowed it and Adam Peters. I don't think they really liked the idea. But, I do think Washington will be involved in Hard Knocks one way or the other, whether that is training camp or whether that is in season NFC East. I do think it is a lot more likely to be an NFC East Hard Knocks in the season rather than Commanders training camp Hard Knocks, but we shall see. So that is what I've got on Hard Knocks, because that was something that I have been keeping an eye on for quite some time now, as no team as of now. I mean, maybe by the time this episode comes out, but it'd be pretty crazy. But by the time this episode comes out, some team is picked as the Hard Knocks, team. But I would be, that is something that's not been decided yet by, NFL Films and by the NFL, and it's something that's not been publicly released. So some final thoughts on the schedule. Again, 4 straight NFC East games to close out the season. Just mentioned that. 8 standalone games, 5 nighttime games, no 1 p.m. games in October and November. So those are the final things out on the schedule. Again, Washington has a top 15, I believe, strength of schedule going into next year. It's going to be a fun season, guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. And there's a lot of pressure riding on this team to deliver. And they've been put in that position because of how well they did last season. And I've mentioned it, but the last 3 years, Washington, I mentioned on my Twitter at Mason_Kenahan, if you want to follow me there, but Washington the last 3 years has had 8 combined standalone / primetime games. This season, they have 8. Just this season. From the years 2022 to 2024, they had 8 combined. 2025, they have 8 total. That is insane. That just shows the amount of work, Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, even Josh Harris have put in behind the scenes. Also, shout out Josh Harris, by the way. Crystal Palace winning the English FA Cup, which if you're a soccer fan, you know what I'm saying. But Josh Harris is I believe a partial owner of Crystal Palace FC, and they ended up winning one of the major trophies in Europe. So congrats to them and congrats to Josh Harris. But the amount of work that he's put in and other people have put into this team and made this team, great and fun to watch for the first time in a long time. It is been awesome. And, a lot of it also is to do with number 5 under center. But the other players on this team deserve, praise too. And so shout out to everyone on the team that, made 8 primetime games possible. And you get a schedule like this because you've earned it, and Washington has definitely earned it last season. So that'll pretty much wrap things up, though, for me. So that'll do it for this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I've been your host, Mason Kenahan. See you guys in the next one. Peace.